Good morning, all of you.
Good morning, ma'am.
Okay, so in continuation with the same history chapter, the national movement, today we will have a look at the Dandi March. Okay, so we have already seen the Khilafat and the non cooperation movement, and why the non cooperation movement ended abruptly, and we have seen the Chori Chora incident also. So now we'll today have a look at the Dandi March. Okay, so if you remember, I told you that the non-cooperation movement, now it had three stages. It was to unfold in stages, and the third stage was civil disobedience movement. First was surrender of title, second boycott, and the third was uh, full-fledged civil disobedience movement. But you know, before that could happen, the movement was abruptly called off because of that violent incident at Chori Chora. Okay, so in the early 1930s, the Indian National Congress, they choose this civil disobedience movement as their main tactic so that they can get independence from the British rule. And they appointed Gandhiji to lead this particular campaign of civil disobedience movement. And the Salt Satyagraha, now it was a campaign of non-violent protest, non-violent passive resistance, and against the British salt tax. And now basically, obviously, in your class you have not been told much, but like when you go to class 10th, you will study more about it, and that is why I tell all class 8 students to do this chapter really very carefully, because you'll have this chapter again in class 10th. Okay, so what happened during this time, that Mahatma Gandhi, he sent a letter to Lord Irwin stating, and that letter had 11 demands, and the it was said that they have to meet these demands within a speculated time period, and if they did not do so, then a full-fledged civil disobedience movement, it will be launched. Civil disobedience movement, like I've told you before, it means a deliberate defying of laws, means a deliberate breaking of colonial laws. When we say deliberate breaking of laws, we don't mean that you go on breaking down every law. We mean only those colonial laws which were discriminatory towards the Indians. Okay, and so this letter has so many demands, like I told you, 11 demands. And now these demands range from peasants to industrial workers and traders and businessmen, and basically it was so that all the social groups, they were included in these demands, and none did not, and none was left out, so that all people would join the movement. And now these demands were not met, and so the civil disobedience movement, it was launched. Now Gandhiji, he could have chosen any of those demands or any of those things to start the civil disobedience movement with. Now it could have been the peasants problems or the workers problems, but you know, Gandhiji, he was a very intelligent, he was a very smart man, and he knew that in salt he got one thing that united all people. Because you know, salt is one thing that is used by one and all, rich and poor alike. Whereas you know, if he would have taken up any of the other demands and started the civil disobedience movement with it, then only that particular section of people, they would have been interested, and the rest would not have been interested in the movement, and they would have not come and joined the movement in large numbers. But salt, it touched the life of every Indian, and you know, there was very high tax on salt, and the British, they had a monopoly on the manufacture and sale of salt. Means only they could manufacture and only they could sell salt, and then they put a very high interest on it, and tax on it. And Gandhiji, according to him, this salt tax, it showed a very oppressive, the most oppressive face of the Britishers. And so the civil disobedience movement, it began with the salt march to Dandi in, and this was on 12th March 1930. And now this was the first act of organized opposition. Means you know, we had the non-cooperation movement, and after that, you know, for quite a while there were no large-scale mass movements. And then in December 1929, at the Lahore session of the Congress has taken up the resolution that now they did not wanted to settle for anything less but Purna Swaraj, or complete independence. So after Purna Swaraj, now this was the first act of organized opposition against the Britishers. And so Mahatma Gandhi, he led the Dandi March from Sabarmati Ashram to Dandi, which was a coastal town in Gujarat, and he was joined with numbers all along the way. So now this was a 240 miles long journey, and it took 24 days to complete, and each day approximately he walked for 10 miles. And on the way he used to stop, and people used to come to listen to him. People kept on joining him. He started this with 72 of his trusted followers, and all along the way people came and joined him. Women also came to listen to him, and he told them what he meant by Swaraj and why he was doing all this. And when he reached Dandi, Gandhiji, he collected a handful of salt from the seashore and broke the salt law. So he boiled seawater to make salt, and thereby he broke the salt law. And this march from Sabarmati to Dandi, it is called as the Dandi March. Now let's see how people reacted to this particular movement and how people participated in this particular movement. Now, women, teenagers, peasants, workers, business community, artisans, rich and the poor, they all came and joined this movement. And even the tribals who lived in the central provinces, Maharashtra, Bihar and Assam, and the hill people of Kangra, they also joined in. And when Mahatma Gandhi, he broke the salt law in Dandi, when the Dandi March was concluded on 6th April 1930. Now after that, throughout the country there were people who broke laws in front of the salt depots. And so there was a breach of salt laws by millions of people. And Gandhiji, he was arrested because of all this on 5th May 1930. And this Dandi March, it got the attention of the worldwide attention because of vast newspaper coverage. And the Satyagraha now the Satyagraha against the salt tax, it continued for almost a year. And what happened, a large number of people were arrested and put in jail because of this civil disobedience movement, because it was deliberate breaking of laws. So people were not only breaking the salt law, but in many places they were not paying the revenue, and they even violated the forest laws. And so people were not paying chowkidari taxes in the villages. So people were breaking laws, and because of that, a large number of people, and 80,000 Indians, they were jailed as a result of this. And so a large number of people were in the jail, and even Gandhiji, he was imprisoned. And so the Britishers, they wanted to get into a pact with Gandhiji. And so this particular Satyagraha civil disobedience movement, it ended with a pact which is called as Gandhi-Irwin Pact. And according to this pact, Gandhiji, he had to call off the civil disobedience movement, and he had to agree to join the second roundtable conference, because the first roundtable conference, it was not attended by the Congress, and it ended in a failure. And so the Congress, they had to attend the second roundtable conference along with Gandhiji, and they had to call off the civil disobedience movement. And in return, the Britishers, they will release all the political prisoners. And so the civil disobedience movement, now it also was called off. And now this campaign, it had a large effect, a very deep effect, a significant effect on the British attitudes towards the Indian independence. And the effects of all the Indians, it really bore some fruit when the Government of India Act of 1935 was announced. And according to this act, India could become a federation or a council of states if 50% of the Indian states, they decided to join it. So like in a way, it brought forth some fruit. But however, the provisions, you just said that okay, India could become a federation or a union of states, not a council, or union of states. And if more 50% of the states wanted it, but the provisions and the acts, how it could really become, now the provisions and the rules, they were not implemented properly. And so nothing was done at that time. And now Government of India Act also granted provincial autonomy. Provincial autonomy means freedom at the provincial or the state level, and so now the ministers of the provincial governments, they were responsible to the legislature, and now they were not responsible to the British government. I mean, in the way that not they were not answerable or responsible to the British officials now, but now they were responsible or answerable and accountable to the legislature. Just like in India also, the executive body, it is answerable to the legislative body. The executive body, it is answerable to the legislative body, and that is why in the parliament, they have so many questions, and queries are asked to the members of the ruling government. Okay. And so the government, they also announced elections to the provincial legislatures in 1937, and the Congress, they formed governments in 7 out of these 11 provinces on its own, and later on they also formed coalition governments in 2 more provinces. Now later than that, the Second World War broke out in September 1939, and as India, it was still a British colony, and so the viceroy, they announced that India was automatically involved in this war with Germany. So just because India was a British colony, and so they said that because Britishers, they were at war with Germany, so they said now India was also automatically involved because India was their colony. And the viceroy, he made this announcements without consulting the Congress, and they did not even inform them, and so in protest, the Congress ministries, they resigned. Now the British government, they wanted active participation of the Indians in this war, and the Indian leaders, they were also sympathetic, but the Indian leaders said that how could India fight for the freedom of some other country when they themselves were not free? Means when they themselves were slaves, how could they fight for the independence of some other country? Okay, so that was the civil disobedience movement, and we see that it was also called up. Now in your book it is not mentioned. Later on again it was again relaunched. The civil disobedience movement was relaunched, but the second time it was relaunched, it did not have so much effect. Okay, so now we move on to the third major mass movement, that is the Quit India movement. Now the Quit India movement was the final call for immediate independence from the British rule, and it was started by Gandhiji on August 8, 1942. And now this movement was made famous by the slogan given by Gandhiji, that is do or die, means karo ya maro. And now when Gandhiji, he was addressing the Congress delegates on the 9th or 8th August, now he said that I want independence immediately. They wanted the Britishers to quit India at that time also, if it was possible, and go. And so that is what he said, that I want freedom immediately. Means even if we could have that independence this very night, even before the sun rises for a new day, if we could have independence, I want it. And and then we shall either free India or die in the attempt. And then he went on to say that they will all do, means the Indians will do their best to get India free, and if they die in the attempt, they were willing to do so, but they will not live to see the perpetuation or the continuation of their slavery. So the Indians, he said that we will fight for the independence of a country, and so in the process we may even free country or we may even die, but we will not live to see the continuation of the slavery of a country. But before Congress, they could start a movement, Gandhiji and all the other important Congress leaders, they were arrested, and the Congress, it was declared illegal. And now as the news of these arrests spread, so people all over the country, now they gave way to their pent up anger. Means people were already very angry with the British rule, and so now in this particular movement, the people were really unstoppable. And though the Congress leaders were all in prison and they were not there to lead the people, but the people, they were unstoppable. And so all over the country there were hartals and strikes in factories, schools and colleges. There were demonstrations everywhere, and in many places people also took to violent actions. They attacked the police stations and post offices, burned government buildings, so all symbols of British authority, they were attacked. They cut the telegraph and the telephone lines, and even the railway lines, they were also destroyed. The students, and in this particular movement, the students and the workers, they provided the backbone. So they were the backbone of the revolt, whereas in this movement also the upper classes, they remained loyal to the British government. And so the British government, they also came down with all force on repressing and suppressing this movement. And so the press, it was completely, you could say, destroyed and muzzled. And the demonstrating crowd, they were machine gunned and even bombed from the air. So the crowds which were peacefully demonstrating and without any violence, even those were machine gunned and they were bombed from the air. And the way they repressed the Indians, it was like without any, beyond any limits. They did everything they could. The prisoners, they were tortured, and the police and the military, they were like reigning without any fear that what they could also be asked or an answer for what, for their actions and all that. But they did as they thought fit. And over 10,000 people, they died in military and police firings. And so so many people, they were killed also, and they were tortured also. And they were even machine gunned and bombed. But the importance of the Quit India movement, it lied in the fact that it this time demonstrated the depth of the nationalist feeling, the unity, the love for the nation. And that the depth of this feeling which has really gone down in the hearts and the minds of the people. And now it was evident to the British rule that they will no longer be able to rule India against the wishes of the people. And so, though this movement also was not able to get us independence, but still, this mass movement was important in the way that it demonstrated the depth of the nationalist feeling in the Indians. Okay, we'll have a look at some of the important uh, popular leaders also. First, having a look at the Muslim League. Now, in 1940, the Muslim League, they moved a resolution and they demanded the independent states for Muslims in the eastern and the northwestern parts of the country. Now, in the parts of the country where the majority of Muslims were living, and so they wanted independent states for Muslim in those areas. But the and in the resolution, the word partition or Pakistan was nowhere mentioned. But why did the League, they make such a demand? Means, why did they ask for independent states for the Muslims? And now from the late 1930s, the League, the Muslim League, they started to view Muslims as a separate nation from the Hindus. And even the Britishers, they used to think that in India, two nations were living together, the Hindus and the Muslims. And so from the late 1930s, the League also, they started to view Muslims as a separate nation from the Hindus. And the provincial elections of 1937, they also convinced the Muslim League that Muslims would remain a minority here, because as we have seen, that Congress made ministries on their own in 7 out of 11 provinces, and in 2 more they made coalition governments. So the Muslim League, they were not able to achieve much in this provincial elections in 1937. And so they were convinced that Muslims were a minority, and they would always have to be second to whatever was being done in the country in any democratic structure that we will have after independence. So the Muslims will always come in second, because obviously here the Hindus were in majority. And the Muslim League also feared that the Muslims could even go unrepresented, means they would not have any representative in the legislative bodies. It could even come to that, and that is why they started to ask for independent states for the Muslims. Okay, now some important popular leaders. Abul Kalam Azad, he was a Muslim scholar, and he was also a senior political leader of the Indian independence movement. He was one of the most prominent Muslim leaders, and he support the Hindu-Muslim unity, and he even opposed the partition of India on communal grounds, means on religious grounds. And he is commonly remembered as Maulana Azad, and he adopted the name Azad, free, as his pen name, the name with which he wrote. Now, Azad, he became a leader of the Khilafat movement. During this Khilafat movement, he came into close contact with Mahatma Gandhi, and he became a supporter of Mahatma Gandhi's ideas of non-violent civil disobedience, and he also worked actively to organize a non-cooperation movement. Azad committed he also totally committed himself to Gandhiji's ideals, and he promoted Swadeshi products and also the cause of Swaraj for India. And he also served as the president of the Indian National Congress for several years. Okay, then we have Chakravarti Rajagopalachari, who was known as Rajaji, and he was an Indian lawyer, and he was the second Governor General of independent India. Then in the year 1919, Rajaji, he chose to follow Mahatma Gandhi, and Mahatma Gandhi, he just returned from South Africa in 1915, and in the year 1921, Rajaji, he was selected as the General Secretary of the Congress Party, and with that he came into close contact with Jawaharlal Nehru, Vallabhbhai Patel, Maulana Azad, Rajendra Prasad, etc., and he began to gain more power and prominence in the party, and he also became a prominent leader of salt satyagraha in South India. And at one time, it was considered that he would succeed Mahatma Gandhi. He also served as a member of the interim government. Interim is a temporary government. Means for the time being government before proper elections could be held for a democratically elected government. So for the time being government, so he was also a member of the interim government in 1946, and later on he also joined Nehruji's cabinet, and he was the chief minister of Madras from 1952 to 1954. Then we have Vallabhbhai Patel. He was a political and a social leader of India, and he played a major role in the India's struggle for independence, and he also guided its integration into a united independent India. At the time we got independence, and India was divided into India and Pakistan. The princely states, they were not merged with either India or Pakistan, and they were given the option that they could join either India or Pakistan. Means according to their wishes they could join any. And now Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, he played a very important role in integration of these princely states into India. And now he was raised in the countryside of Gujarat, and he was a successful practicing lawyer. And so when he first came into Mahatma Gandhi's contact, and now he was really inspired by Gandhiji's work and philosophy. And so he subsequently also organized the peasants of Kheda, Borsad and Bardoli in a non-violent civil disobedience movement against the oppressive policies of the British Raj, and he became one of the most influential leaders in Gujarat, and he rose to the leadership of the Indian National Congress, and he was also in the forefront, means one of the most important and popular leaders of the freedom struggle. Okay, so I think I will stop here today. Any questions? Is there anything that you have not understood? All understood?